Is there any public comment today?
We do not have anybody signed up for public
All
comment
right.
today.
Sounds good. Well, Portland Children's Levy Director Lisa Pellegrino will present on the proposed revisions to our committee bylaws. Hi, Lisa.
Okay, it's red. That's fooling me. Yeah, okay, I just need to know that. Nice to see you all, and I'm hoping that Megan can join us soon. The first item on the agenda is a proposed amendment to the bylaws, and we are proposing those amendments to the community bylaws to correct two things. The first is to refer to the correct and the current levy authorization that was passed in 2023, and to correct the council ordinance number that created the levy, to update it, and then to also delete the references in the bylaws to the commissioner in charge and replace them with the counselor appointed to sit on the allocation committee. So it's just changing the language. Under the old form of city government, the mayor assigned commissioners in charge to each bureau. The commissioner in charge of PCL was the one that sat on the allocation committee. Under the new form of government, the mayor appoints a city councilor to sit on the allocation committee. So there's no more commissioner in charge. That has been taken away from city government. They have reorganized it. So the choice for the person to sit on the committee is still the mayor's choice. That has not changed. It's just the mechanism that they use to put the person on the committee. And all the city is changing all the language that refers to commissioner in charge throughout all of the code and other places. So this is kind of just an update, really. I sent you all a track changes copy so you could see what was proposed to be changed. I just wanted to check in if there was any questions or concerns or any discussion.
Thank you. There's a lot of cosmetic technical changes taking place throughout the city because the voters asked for a change of government. So thank you for being right on it. Lisa, any questions? Okay. Is this a voting item?
It is a voting item.
Okay, so we've heard the motion to do the technical changes to be current with the new form of government. We have a motion that was brought to us. Do we have a second?
Second.
And any more discussion on this? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, no one's opposed.
Awesome.
So we
Thank you.
can move on to the next item. And you're presenting that as well.
I am.
Hey,
I am presenting
Megan.
that. So
Commissioner Moyer has joined us and she's present. We thought you were going to be online, so this is great. Come on up.
Hi, great. Okay.
We just have to find a spot.
Okay, sorry. You told me you were going to be virtual, so I assumed that you just needed your link.
So we are delighted at this moment to welcome and introduce our newest committee member, Multnomah County Commissioner Megan Moyer. Welcome. And sorry, did you go to the City Hall? Yeah, it would have been really convenient for me too. Yeah. So, but we're up here in the 1900 building, and Commissioner Megan Moyer is replacing Commissioner Julie Brim Edwards. The county chair can appoint new people as needed, and so we're so delighted to have Megan here. Commissioner Moyer, sorry, you're a social services policy expert. I've had the pleasure of watching you speak quite a bit because you were campaigning, and I know that's true from listening to you, and you really have a great history in this space. So we're really delighted to have your life experience show up for our children and youth of Portland. And is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, just that I'm really excited to get this appointment and really looking forward.
Yeah, it's really nice to see you. I look forward to getting to know you between this meeting and the next one.
Right.
Anyway, so I think we're all here, and then Felicia's coming a little bit later, and we'll
Yes,
figure
she
out
had
where she
another
can
board meeting.
sit. I'll move my coat. Okay, take away item 3.
Okay, so we're going to start out this item. This is to kind of give you all, if you want to think about this, this is your big picture introduction to who has applied for grants in this funding round. So Megan, I know you're new, and we've had a little bit of chance to do briefings, so I know you know there's a funding round underway. And we received a bunch of applications in September, and this committee has had some regular updates on things. Now we did a more in-depth analysis, and we provided that information to our community council last month. You'll hear some more about that later, but we're going to tell you the same information that we told them around what the applicant pool looks like. Okay, so you can go to the next slide. So this slide summarizes the applications that we received at the high level. So we received 168 total applications. That's a 45% increase over 2019. Those applications requested $222 million in total funding over 3 years, and that's nearly double the amount that was requested in 2019. The total 3-year funding available is $64.7 million. Again, that's a projection, so we are basing that on our projections of revenues. And this is a 5.5% decrease compared to what we had available in 2019, and a decrease also from current grant funding levels. This is partly due to projected revenue decline and also partly due to spending down fund balance that we had allocated in the 2019 funding round. So we expected we would have somewhat less resources. The revenue projections going down means we have less than we thought we would have. To review, so the next line item there is the total reviewers. We have volunteer community members who do review of the applications and score them. And to review the greater number of applications we received, we recruited and trained 96 community volunteers with lived and professional experience in PCL's program areas and priority populations. This was 50% more reviewers than we recruited in 2019. So we had a big crew that we worked with this time. The overall growth in applications is likely because PCL staff did a lot of outreach to ensure that potential applicants knew about this funding opportunity, and we tried to identify organizations working in our program areas and that serve the priority populations and serve children and families in Portland. As you can see, we had more than a 200% increase in the number of applications from organizations that do not currently have a PCL grant. So a lot of new organizations and new programs coming to request funds. So this next slide shows, again, the big picture, just so you can all keep this in mind of what we're looking at for this funding round. The current annual grant budgets for large grants, so that excludes our small grants portfolio, and it excludes the Community Child Care Initiative, which we'll talk more about later on in the presentation. So it's just the large grants. The total for that was $27.2 million in budgets this year. 1/3 of the resources that are projected to be available over the next 3-year grant period is $21.56 million. Okay, so that's 1/3 of that 64.7 that you saw on the last slide. And so that means that on an annual basis, the total funds for large grants are going to decline approximately 21% next year. So we just want to make sure that everyone understands the situation that we're looking at. The combination of declining resources and a 45% increase in applications for programs that are not currently funded means that we're going to have a lot of difficult choices. So I just am saying this as a way to prepare everybody, both the folks who are watching, the applicants, as well as you all, for what's coming up. Okay, you can move on to the next slide. So the next set of slides are going to help you kind of just we're going to look at multiple variables together in one slide to help you understand kind of what it looks like in the different program areas on requested funding and some other data points that are key. So this graph is looking by program area, the application. It compares the total annual dollars over 3 years that we have requested by applicants to the total amount of levy funding that we have to grant over 3 years in each program area. The dark blue bars on the left are the amount of funds requested over 3 years. Keep in mind that the Allocation Committee allocated funding ranges for each program area, a low end and a high end. The orange bar represents the low end available over 3 years. There's not enough funding to fund the high end across the board. Under the bars are the number of applications received in each program area. And what we can observe from this, or what we take away from this, is that the after-school and mentoring program areas received over half of the total applications submitted and requested nearly half of the dollars. The gap between the funding requested and available is largest for those two program areas. The gap between total funds requested and total funds available is the smallest for foster care and hunger relief. So you can see it's not evenly distributed in terms of the requests. Okay, go to the next application. So this slide shows you the number of applications in each program area and the median score of the applications in each program area. The maximum score possible was 152, and the median score is the highest for the foster care applications and lowest for child abuse and prevention applications. Scores vary based on several factors, including the quality of the applications and grant writing, the quality of the reviewers and their interpretation of the scoring criteria. While demand for dollars and number of applications is higher in after-school and mentoring, median scores on those applications are not the highest. So this is just giving you a sense for kind of where scoring fell. We created a median score for each application. So the 4 reviewers look at it, and there's a median score. The median of those 4 reviewers' scores is the final score. Okay, you can go to the next. So this graph looks at recent PCL funding status. The total number of applications PCL received, as I said before, was 168. The slide shows the number and portion of applications based on the application's recent funding status with PCL. So applications from grantee organizations for the same program that we're currently funding, applications from grantee organizations for a different program that PCL is not funding, and applications from organizations without PCL funds. So those are the 3 categories there. As you can see, over half of all applications are from PCL grantee organizations. Most of those applications, 74, are to keep funding program services that PCL currently funds. A small number, 18 or 11%, you can see that small slice of the pie, are to fund a different program at an organization that currently has a PCL grant. We received 76 applications, so 45% of the total, as I said before, from organizations that currently do not receive PCL funds. Further analysis shows that the majority of those applications are in after-school and mentoring program areas. For the other program areas, the majority of applications are from organizations that currently have PCL grants. So you can see that, again, the profiles look different depending on the program area. So this slide looks at the size of the organization and their recent PCL funding status. It shows the number of applications based on the size of the organization, and we sized the organizations based on their annual revenues in their last closed fiscal year. The blue bar shows the number of applications from grantee organizations, and the gray bars show the number of applications from organizations without PCL funds. Please note that organizations with revenues under $750,000 were not eligible to apply in this grant fund. Those folks will be eligible to apply in the small grants fund round, which we expect to happen later this calendar year. These data illustrate that applications from organizations without PCL funds tend to be smaller organizations, and applications from organizations with current PCL grants tend to be larger organizations. Further analysis indicates that after-school and mentoring have proportionally more applications from smaller organizations compared to the other 4 program areas. So again, you can see there's clustering and variance between the program areas. And I didn't say this before, but if you have any questions as I'm going, you can interrupt or raise your hand or get my attention. I meant to say that and I forgot. Okay, so this looks at the median score for applications based on the recent PCL funding status and the size of the organization. And you can see that applications from grantee organizations had a higher median score than applications from organizations without PCL funds. Similarly, applications from large organizations had a higher median score than applications from small organizations. These results were not that surprising to us because, as we saw in the previous slides, the organizations with PCL history tend to be larger organizations, and they have experience with past PCL grant application processes. In general, larger organizations tend to have more grant writing capacity and experience compared to smaller organizations. So that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, these next 3 graphs are going to look at focused populations, okay? This graph shows the number of applications that propose to serve PCL priority populations. So you can see the priority populations on the left, and the number of applications in those bars reflect the number of applications that are proposing to serve those groups. So of the 168 applications received, 151 propose to serve families earning low incomes. This doesn't mean that the remaining 17 are proposing to serve families earning high incomes. It just means that those 17 selected other focused populations and not income. Keep in mind that many applications propose to serve multiple priority populations, each of which is counted separately for these graphs I'm going to show you. For example, a single application may have proposed to serve every group on this slide, while some applications may have proposed to serve some or very few of the priority populations. Just depends on how they're focusing their program. So the slide helps you understand that the number of times each of these populations was selected as a focus population across all applications. So does that make sense? This is as many applications total. You're going to have more numbers here than you have total applications. Okay, you can go to the next one. So this graph is going to show the number of applications that propose to serve PCL priority populations by race and ethnicity. Of the 168 applications received, 129 propose to serve African youth, children and youth. This does not mean they only propose to serve that population. It means in combination, potentially. This slide helps you understand the number of times that these populations were selected as a focus population across all applications. Okay, you can go to the next one. So this graph shows the number of applications based on whether they propose to reach PCL priority populations in general or to focus on specific populations. Using responses in the applications, PCL grouped applications into 3 categories: applications that propose to serve all of PCL priority populations, applications that focus on serving Black, Indigenous, and children of color, and one or a few other priority populations, such as, say, immigrants and refugees, or people with disabilities, or LGBTQIA. Applications that focus on, the third category is applications that focus on serving only a few PCL priority populations, which is typically meant that their choices were to serve 1 to 2 racial ethnic populations and 1 to 2 other priority populations. So again, there's obviously overlap in all of these different populations, right? So many, but not all of the applications that focus on Black, Indigenous, and people of color populations that have that focus and a specific focus came from culturally specific programs. Similarly, some culturally specific programs propose to serve a general multicultural population, meaning they didn't select a specific focus. So these groupings that we created, they're not perfect and they have limitations, but they allow us some understanding of the variation in applications by population served.
Lisa, how many slides are there? How many more?
3 more in this?
Okay, good.
Okay.
The reason I asked is because I think I'll just wait till you're done and have you go back.
Okay,
with
yeah, there's
questions.
just 3 more. So these next 3 slides are all about the funding priorities. And I realized for Commissioner Moyer, who's new, you weren't, and actually Charity too, you were not there when we were creating the funding priorities. So these priorities you see on the left came from the community engagement process and then were worked on by the Community Council and then came here to be approved by the Allocation Committee. So these were the things that people in our community say they need and wanted us to be focusing on for investment. So this slide shows you the funding priorities for mentoring and for after school. It looks at the number of applications addressing each funding priority in mentoring and after school, and the program areas and their funding priorities are listed on the left. The bars show the number of applications that propose to address a funding priority. A funding priority was counted each time the application addressed it. For example, if an application proposed to address the 3 funding priorities, each one is counted as 1 in this graph. So this graph illustrates that in these 2 program areas, all funding priorities are well covered across the applications. In fact, most applications in these program areas propose to address most or all of the funding priorities. So it's just some insurance, if you want to think about it, that the applications in general are well covering the priorities that the community had identified. So the next slide shows the same information for the foster care and the child abuse prevention funding priorities. Again, you can see that all funding priorities are well covered. Of the 24 applications in child abuse prevention and intervention, the majority are addressing 5 funding priorities. The funding priorities where fewer applications address them are still covered by at least 7 applications in those program areas. Altogether, this means that no funding priority is unaddressed or only addressed by 1 or 2 applications. So again, we might have to check more carefully in the end analysis when we make funding decisions, but overall, good coverage. Okay, the final slide is for early childhood and hunger relief funding priorities. And again, we show good coverage of all the applications in early childhood. Most addressed at least 3 funding priorities. Hunger relief applications had more variation in which funding priorities, in terms of which funding priorities the applications addressed, with the majority addressing 3 or more of the 5 priorities. The funding priorities where fewer applications address them are still covered by at least 7 applications in those areas. So again, no funding priority is unaddressed. So that's the basic message we want to make sure you understood. Okay, you can, that concludes kind of the big view of what did our application pool look like.
Thank you, Lisa. Committee, now's the time to have a conversation about what we just experienced, and the staff is always good about going back to the slide that you're talking about. There's no silly question. So please know this is a relaxed meeting. We're here to provide higher elevation feedback for the staff as they execute during a very difficult time. These were tough numbers.
Yeah.
Does anyone have any leading questions? Commissioner?
Sure.
Dan Ford.
Maybe we go to, I think it's slide 3 or 4 that showed one of the first slides that showed the 21.5 million.
Yeah.
Just in relation to the large and small grants, is that 21.5 applicable to both large and small? And so how?
Nope, small grants are not a part of this process at all. I just wanted to make clear that, so that 21.56 is 1/3. So we are making 3-year grants. I guess I should step back here. These are 3-year grants. So people come in and they request a 3-year amount. We took the 3-year resources that we have available, which is 64.7, divided that by 3 to get an approximate amount of resource you will allocate for next year. But the committee is going to be allocating 3-year grants, just to be clear. But I wanted to make sure that people understood that on an annual basis, this is a decline. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for your patience too, because it probably is clear to some people here, but this is the first time that I've experienced this process. May I ask a second question?
Yeah, please.
So second question, and somewhere in the middle there, when we're talking about the priority populations, both racial and then there are a number of other priorities. And I did do my homework, but I'm still learning here. Is the goal for an organization to cover as many as possible?
Not necessarily, no. The idea, the whole point of asking that question was to make sure we understood if they had a focus. Are you focusing on a particular population? So people mostly answered the question that way. Some interpreted it more as a who do you serve question, in which case they might have listed all the different groups of people that they serve, but it might not be who they focus on.
Okay.
All programs have to take whoever comes in their door, pretty much. Nobody can exclude people, but they may, in terms of who they do their outreach to or who they attempt to attract into their program, they may have a focus for that.
Commissioner Moyer, yeah.
How confident are we in the 21 million shortfall not growing? Or do we have a potential liability that the whole over the next 3 years could become larger than that?
We never know. We always hope it will not. I would say our economist has tended to be conservative, but that doesn't mean he's not wrong, because they are forecasting compression, and that can change. So other ballot measures can come on that potentially compress you. The compression figures can change depending on what happens with assessed values. And in the current climate, the downtown, the fall in real estate value and buildings downtown is affecting that to some degree, where values might fall below the assessed value, in which case you are not, it decreases the amount of tax that you are going to get from that. So we're reasonably confident, but honestly, I mean, I'm not an economist, so I don't want to say. I'm taking the word of the city economist on that.
I just have a general question about programming. I'm not sure if it was addressed in the slides or maybe it's implied, but with previous year's funding and what you're seeing in the current applications, do you notice applicants being more specific in their priority areas or more broad? Is there any trend either way that you're seeing?
I can't say we analyzed for that specifically. And again, it's current. So we are in these analyses, this is all what's in applications, right? So that includes programs we're currently funding who are applying for continuing funding for the same program. So we didn't separate out what the sort of specificity, welcome Felicia, the specificity of requests from ongoing programs versus programs that are new or not known to us. So we didn't analyze that specifically. So I'm not sure I could really say with confidence, unless Meg did something I didn't know about on analysis. Always possible. Okay, just checking. She's the analyst in chief on data variables.
I'm happy to report that Felicia Tripp Folsom is here earlier than we thought. Thank you for getting here on earlier than you even forecasted. So thanks. We now have a full committee, 100% attendance. Did you have another follow-up question? I have like a big picture one that I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it. So when we were going over, there was pre-information. Now there's more reality is the only way I can frame it. And so now you have the real-time information, exactly how many you've studied the characteristics. And then we did our forecasting prior. I never think that there aren't detours when you get real information. So have there been any big picture insights since you've done more analysis of the characteristics of the applicants and some of our pre-determined decisions that we made And is there any adjustments that you think are in order?
I mean, at this stage of the game, I
Looking
wouldn't.
for themes or
Yeah, no, I understand. And I think in general, the allocation ranges that you created in June when you were kind of creating, we would like
Right.
to allocate between this much and this much, I think still potentially hold. I think it's going to, because we are always balancing factors for the number of applications you receive in a program area, you can see there's quite a few more applications in some program areas than
Yes.
others, right? So that's going to call into question, do we want to shift any of that or not? I am not prepared to speak to that today because I don't think we have concluded what our advice would be, but we can see that there's variance between program areas in terms of demand.
I'm chewing on that as someone that gives advice from this higher elevation. If staff would dig into that a little bit more. One area that, again, this is a hunch from just looking at this report right now, and also information that we keep hearing about our students having a lot of struggles since COVID. We're not seeing the getting back to what like scores were prior to COVID, and we're sadly having a harder time than other states and other cities across the country. So when I see after-school programs, which I also know we've had labor issue, we've had workforce challenges there, we've had participation challenges there. So there's one rule of thumb, which is you go to where the impact is happening and it's working, and so keep investing. And then there's looking at where the big gaps of challenges are, and will putting more investment at it at this time be helpful if in fact we can work with those providers who are struggling. Not a shameful word, it's just the conditions out there have made it difficult. So that's where I'm going, is in some of those areas. And then seeing how many applicants you got in that space was kind of startling to me. I don't know if that was shocking to you or if it's exactly how it's been in the past.
It is how it's been in the past, and after school in particular, it's always been the biggest demand area. I think it's partly because of a funding environment. There are no real other big government funders of after-school programs aside from the county
Right, I'm
SUN
thinking
system.
the SUN system,
and,
right.
and the 21st century system at the federal level. There is no state they make some after-school investments just, in programs that do provide after-school services, but they don't have a funding area, for instance, that specifically focuses on that. So we are a place that people come because there aren't a lot of other institutional funders in that space. Mentoring, I think, really skyrocketed this time because we both expanded the age range that we are able to serve, right? So we went up to age 24 so we could cover the career and into apprentice and college and those kind of things. So with the age range is larger, and also the funding priorities were different this time. So the things that came from community about what we should fund were broader and more. So people wanted different kinds of programs. And so that means more programs can apply because they're offering a service that would meet that need. So I'm not terribly surprised that it worked out this way. I also think that child abuse prevention and foster care is a very small number of youth, so there's like a certain number, there's only so many programs that serve a relatively small group of people. And child abuse prevention tends to be not an area where you see a lot of small organizations working. So in some ways, I'm not surprised, I guess is what I would say.
Okay. And then on another slide, you could show where the priorities were based on, I think it was based on race and culture. I think we called out African, then we did African American, Latinx.
On the focus population slides, maybe? Let's see. Maybe he means do you mean this one where it's
think, yeah,
talking
this
about?
one.
Yeah.
And the Latino, Latine number, I think, pops out to me a bit because of the percentage of students is much higher than some of the populations above it. And the need and it's been exploding. And then we know in current time, there's a lot of compassion for how we can respond. So that was another slide that popped out at me just in trends. And I'm hoping that the staff can dig in a little bit more to that. I know our East Portland school districts, David Douglas, Park Rose in particular, are dealing with just a lot of issues in this area and just trying to get their students and their community members to feel safe to come to school. And we have to do everything we can to promote that and not add more hysteria. So I don't want to be the white ally that thinks I know more about that. I think that's actually a problem. It's more that we have to keep listening to that community, and I think we need to consider extra resources for that population at this time. That's just opinion, because we get paid to think, that I have on this at this time, looking at the data. So.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate hearing that. Commissioner Moore, did you have a question?
Yeah, on the foster care programs, and I can't remember what slide that is. I had a question related to, is there an emphasis at all for children aging out of foster care versus children in foster care? I worry a little bit about this, the state has a responsibility for the foster care system. I'm underwhelmed by how they're delivering on that. But there is a real cliff as youth age out. And, from a county perspective, that's when we start to see them in a variety of different ways. Right now, 50% of former foster youth experience homelessness in the first 5 years after leaving care. That's a crisis. We don't do a very good job transitioning youth, and there's the state has a lawsuit of which they settled, and that is one of the areas that they are to improve on. I'm skeptical about how much resources in the short term are going to be put into that. So I look at this and I'm not really 100% clear where that line is and how we look at mentoring foster youth / birth parents. I assume that is for younger age children who are at risk of foster. I'm a little unclear about what some of these are.
It makes sense, because these are shorthanded too, so, they're not getting the full picture. So our foster care, in terms of funding services, we've always, as long as we've had this program area, funded 0 to 24, so the whole spectrum, because to cover that very issue that you're talking about, it's been an issue for a long time, remains an issue. So we do currently fund, for instance, several programs that are specifically working with youth over that transition period. So I have, in terms of, we will have that detailed data on the applicant programs, so that's something you will be able to see. So you can see what age they serve and the type of service they're providing. So in terms of, prioritizing, there's a lot of things that go into prioritizing which programs to fund. So there's a whole set of questions there, but there's no doubt that there is programs there that are addressing that specific age group in general, specifically, and also addressing that issue of the transition itself. If that makes sense.
And I think it's also fair to say that I got on this committee in 2020 and the end of 2020 and have been a voice for expanding to 24, because I do think that's one of government's biggest failures is that cliff. And of course it's for foster, but it's so many youth that aren't from families that can provide support. Because families that can provide support until you're 24, 25, we all know that happens. And that many families cannot, and we don't have the system set up for those to have a slope instead of cliffs, which is, I think, what government's always trying to find is more slopes and less cliffs. So I think it gets to something I'm trying to sort through looking at the data on how we can make a statement that this current group has been talking about more investments in the 18 to 24 space. And I would hope that at this time we can, even with the compression and the lower revenue, that we can proportionally continue to make that a statement and a focus. Okay. And others can pile in. I mean, I don't want to act like it hasn't just been, I know that, Felicia, we've had dialogue about this over the last few years, so.
Not a question, just a general observation and comment, and that is I have a lot of questions as well that can't be answered at this level. And I think once we dig into the details of each of the applicants and their goals and outcomes and their approach, a lot will become clearer on how we prioritize the funds and how we allocate given the current political environment and funding environment and priorities that communities have uplifted through the council and through their the processes over the last couple of years. So I think it's hard for me to be patient to get to that information, but I know that you're working hard, all of you, to give us that, and I'm excited to go through it together and have a chat and better understand what the needs are.
Okay, great. You have any-
Pushing the button.
Red means it's on. It's a trick mic.
I think I have it on. Okay, there it goes. So one of the things, as the only committee member that has actually been through the review process, I would encourage all of us to really know that before it comes to us, it's going through many members before us. We have volunteers dedicated to going out and visiting these organizations. We have our Levy staff also going and reviewing, and you're going to get detailed notes and recommendations for each of the applications. And so from there, we then make the decision. So I just want everybody to really realize that. And the other thing is, we should be really proud of the Levy funding, and this is why. Every year this has come up on the ballot, it has passed with unanimous support. And that's because we, as the Levy, have done a good job of being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. And as Lisa said, this is a unique funding source that every Levy member I've ever seen, every trustee member has taken extremely seriously, and goes back and actually reads the recommendations from the community. We all have our biased areas that we want to support, but I also want to encourage us to really look at the work we've done with community, to really look at those funding priorities too, as we make very, very tough decisions. And I agree with you, there are priority populations, and in this political climate, yes, there is that overlay, but you're also going to see 50% of these applications we're going to look at are applications that we haven't seen before. I also say for current applicants, let's look at what their success rate is, and are they doing what we're asking them to do with the levy? And so as we're going through this time, I'm just encouraging all of us as trustees to really weigh both. And remember, before it comes to us, it has hundreds of hours of work before us. And I just want to personally thank Levy staff. I want to thank grant reviewers. I want to thank all of those people, because you make our jobs easier, even though we have the tough decision of making the final selection.
That's a good point to make, and I know we have new folks, and so I know I've sort of gone over some of this information with people in different places, but you're right, you've got volunteer reviewers who are scoring these applications, and you have staff reviewing them, and you will have the community council making, we're going to describe to you that's the next part of the presentation, is go on to that. You'll hear what community council is going to do as well. So there's a lot of people giving input along the way that you'll have to draw on.
Okay, thank you for the insight, and you're right. I just didn't want to lose sight, though, of the big picture conversations we had around the 18 to 24. I'm not being defensive now, I'm just like, I think our job is to give just big picture, but thanks for always reminding us that there's quite a journey that's already taken place, and it's happening now. On that note, let's transition to hearing about the community council update. I think it's right in line with what was being discussed. A new part of our system. This wasn't here last time.
Is my mic? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you're on.
Good afternoon. I've met some of you and I haven't met some of you. My name is Katrina Peterson. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator. And I'm joined today by Kamala Hurst, who is a member of our Community Council. And together we will be giving the Community Council update. Okay, so the council met on January 24th to provide staff with guidance on which application characteristics to prioritize in creating two portfolios of applications to recommend for funding. So to achieve this outcome, council members discussed and voted on 3 questions. The questions and the results are listed in the following slides and outline the priorities of a majority or close to a majority of community council members. In discussion, council members also expressed the desire for staff to create portfolios with a balance of investments across program areas as aligned with allocations previously set by the allocation committee. Staff sought council's input on priorities because using only SCORE to make funding recommendations has shortcomings. For example, some applications score highly due to strong grant writing, but the proposed program may have substantial design flaws or have had past performance challenges. Similarly, some applications score low due to lack of grant writing experience, though they may excel in engaging their focus population and in delivering effective services.
Hello? Okay. The first question that council members voted on was, in general, after SCORE, what are the top 3 application characteristics you want to prioritize for funding? 8 council members voted to prioritize applications focused on serving Black and Indigenous children and families of color, along with a range of other priority populations, such as LGBTQIA+, immigrant and refugee disability. 5 council members voted to prioritize applications from organizations with annual revenues under $6 million. This is the category that characterizes small applicant organizations. 4 council members voted to prioritize applications focused on serving 1 to 2 specific racial, ethnic, PCL priority populations and/or 1 to 2 other PCL priority populations.
The second question that council members voted on was, if an application scores at or above the median, what are the top 3 characteristics that would deprioritize it for funding? And so keep in mind, as we're retelling the votes, there were 9 council members present total. So 6 council members voted to deprioritize applications from organizations with annual revenues over $18 million. This is the category that characterizes large applicant organizations. 6 council members voted to deprioritize applications serving general multicultural populations with no specific focus. And 4 council members voted to deprioritize applications from current grantees seeking funding for a program PCL doesn't currently fund.
The third question that council
Could you
members
go
voted
back to
on.
that last one? I want to make sure I understood it. C. So does that mean that they're not in a priority area any longer, or?
So this characteristic describes PCL grantees, so organizations that already have PCL funding,
Right.
and they've put in an application for funding a program that we don't currently fund. And so this was an instance of the community council helping to give staff guidance about under what circumstances we might want to deprioritize applications. It might not mean that none of these programs get funded, but this is their guidance about what types of applications to deprioritize, especially if they score at or above the median.
So they're pivoting to a different program it's the same organization, but they're pivoting from one program to another to seek funding for.
So the options that were available to the community council, there were 22 options that they could select from. So the 3 that you're seeing here don't include, like you don't see the full list of the items that they could select amongst. This was just their general guidance about what to deprioritize.
Yeah, go ahead. Can I step in just to help clarify? Commissioner Ryan, I think you characterized what C is telling you correctly.
Okay.
These are applications. What C is telling you is applications from organizations that currently have a levy grant and want to pivot to have something else funded by the levy. Community council is saying those are a lower priority for, like, Community Council does not want us to prioritize those for this new funding round as much as they want us to prioritize what you just heard in the previous slide. Small organizations that haven't had levy funds before, that are serving Black, Indigenous, and children of color, or are focused on only a few priority populations. So do you see what we're sort of trying to describe as the trade-off
I
here?
do. I
Okay.
understand the information, and thanks for saying I was characterizing it correctly
Correctly.
earlier. And I wanted to make sure that's what I was hearing.
Yes, okay. I was watching your processing, and I just wanted to make sure as I was describing it that,
Yeah, I don't play poker very well. So,
no, you're doing great.
it just was confusing to me.
Clearly.
And so, that's like earlier, like you want to dig a little deeper. Like if they pivoted to something that's more appropriate today because of the need and other, so I guess I will remain a little bit confused until I overlay it with that, if that made any sense to anyone else. Okay. Yes.
Can I also
Commissioner Moore.
ask a clarifying question? On that line, are organizations only allowed to have one application in? So we could continue funding their existing program and would deprioritize giving them an additional grant. Is that?
Correct.
Okay,
Or a
all right.
grant for a program that doesn't currently exist, that would be a startup, for example. And we have to weigh whether or not we should shift resources to that or consider funding an organization that has never had a levy grant, but maybe doing something similar or in a different part of town, but for a similar population. So I think as Katrina was trying to share, Community Council wrestled with those characteristics that you all heard earlier and tried to prioritize which ones they want us to use as we think about crafting funding recommendations for you all. So go ahead.
Thank you, Commissioner Moyer. That actually helps explain
Okay.
C.
I'm not seeing on this list, and maybe because it wasn't one of the options, deprioritizing grant applications that had poor performance.
We will get into that in a minute.
Okay.
Community Council was given a set of characteristics to vote between, which Katrina just began to talk about. Performance is something that we as a staff are absolutely taking into account. We aren't putting that on the table as a priority because it is a priority no matter what. So people don't get to vote that down. Performance of a current grant is absolutely something that staff will use as part of its recommendations. Staff also will look at things like the scale and scope of the proposed services in the application, the cost in the context of what they're proposing to do, and the organizational health of the applicant organization. So there's sort of a set of things that staff has always used and always analyzed, and those are non-negotiables. These are the list of things that we were like, well, lots of people with great minds can think differently about them, and what does this group of 13 or 9 who attended the meeting and voted have to say about it? So does that help? Great.
Meg, or one of you guys can answer, why the bias this year for smaller revenue organizations? Because when I'm thinking about priority populations and I'm thinking of past grantees, one of the nonprofits that serve a significant amount of African-American populations would not be prioritized because they're over the revenue threshold. And so I want to know why this revenue threshold. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but just thinking about past PCL grantees that would be deprioritized to have a successful track record in this area.
Well, I think there's two things that to consider here. The priorities don't mean it's a absolute yes, and the depriorities don't mean it's an absolute no. This is just guidance to help us sift through 168 applications, and we can't fund them all. So I think your point is really well taken, Felicia. Many of the current grants that we fund are with organizations that have revenues over $18 million, and they're doing things with priority populations all over this community, and some of them are performing very well. So I do think we as a staff will be balancing these priorities from a group of community members with the things that we also know around performance and where resources are currently. And those are going to be ways in which we construct the portfolios. They, as Katrina will explain in a minute, will choose between 2 different portfolios of recommended grants, and then you all will make the final decision about how to approve those recommendations or fine tune them. But I just want to keep in mind as you hear more about these priorities, these are not, the priorities are priorities. They don't mean yes or no with absolute terms. They mean if you're unsure or you need some guidance, here are some tools we would like you to use because they are from the community and reflecting their voice. You all want to add anything? Okay. Does that help? Okay.
If I may, I could add some of what I heard around why there was some more interest in funding organizations under 18 million. Not to say this was right or wrong, but just to reflect the conversations. I think there was a feeling among some that large organizations of that size might be able to seek funding from other sources if they did not receive PCL funding, whereas the smaller organizations might be more challenged in finding funding sources. And I think there was also some excitement about some smaller organizations be newer to PCL and really wanting to feel like we did a good job collectively of bringing new people into the levy with this. So that's just a few things I wanted to lift up.
I appreciate you being vulnerable to express the views of your team of 9. I just, for the record, want to say, as somebody that's raised money for organizations below $1 million up to organizations above 10 million, it's never easy. It's always difficult. And when you're bigger, you just have a larger budget, and therefore you need to seek more resources. So I think sometimes that smaller and larger debate is confusing to me based on my life experience. So I just had to say that.
Okay, I'm going to go to the third question. The third question that council members voted on was, if an application scores below the median, what are the top 3 application characteristics that would prioritize it for funding? 5 council members voted to prioritize applications from organizations that don't currently receive PCL funding. 5 council members voted to prioritize applications from organizations with annual revenues under $6 million. This is the category that characterizes small applicant organizations. 4 council members voted to prioritize applications focused on serving Black and Indigenous children and families, and children and families of color, along with a range of other priority populations such as LGBTQIA+, immigrant and refugee, disability. 4 council members voted to prioritize applications focused on serving 1 to 2 specific racial, ethnic PCL priority populations and/or 1 to 2 other PCL priority populations.
So that concludes the update that we have from the January 24th Community Council meeting. I believe that Brian will be up next, and he'll speak a little bit about the process of large grants funding process and how the Community Council fits into that.
Thank you for your presentation, but don't leave yet. Are there any more questions now that we've received all the information?
Sure. Yeah, one more question. And hopefully Meg doesn't have to come back up here. So to be clear, these 3 questions and then the priorities or deprioritizing are they're for guidance. There's the non-negotiable things, and this is guidance not only for the community council, but also for us. So if Dan wants to go support organizations over, say I want to support organizations over 18 million, we can still do that. This is guidance.
That's correct. My understanding is that in putting together the portfolios, staff will be taking into consideration the score. And keep in mind that score was produced and reflects the work of 96 community volunteers, and it's the median score of 4 reviewers. So 4 reviewers looked at every single application. So they'll look at score, they'll look at these priorities that you just heard, and then they'll look at staff considerations, which Meg outlined, which include the feasibility of the proposed program, the scale and the cost of the program, the financial health of the organization, and the past performance of current grantees. And they will take all of that information and use that to put together 2 portfolios. And they're going to bring those 2 portfolios to the Community Council on March 3rd. And the Community Council is going to weigh the benefits and tensions of the different portfolios. And then they will choose to vote to recommend one to you all for adoption and tweaking.
Any follow-up?
And Meg nodded, so you didn't have to come back up here. Good job. Thank you.
Just a comment.
Please.
And this is for Lisa and Meg. What I'm hearing from Community Council, which has been in the levy forever and a day, is how do we fund more smaller organizations? That was one of the reasons why we created the portfolio Erica really manages. And one of the things I'm hearing from Community Council is how do we fund more of those organizations? And I think we, as the trustees, should really look at how do we expand more of our small grants program in the future as well, beyond just this large grant program. So I just want to acknowledge that and really hear the Community Council and acknowledge that as well, because that has come up every single year we've done the large grants program.
I'd just like to add, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the last community council meeting, and watching Katrina and the whole team work with those members who are completely dedicated, giving of their time to go through and ask hard questions, to be vulnerable, to have conflict and come to resolution, and also just disagree collectively. It was really impressive and very informative. So thank you for, that was a lot, that was a heavy lift, and for doing all that and bringing that rich information back to us so we can be the most informed with our decisions as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you for attending the meeting, bringing that insight. Anyone else? Any more questions? Thank you. That's a great report. Yeah. And also a reminder of all the readers that are doing this hard work. And I did see, what was the increase in the amount of people that are scoring? It's like, it was a high percent. Yeah, that was one of the biggest increases. Yeah. And that means staff is doing more work. So thank you.
Is this on? No.
Welcome.
Hello, hi. So for those of you who haven't met, my name is Brian Schmenninghoff. I support the after-school portfolio as well as a portion of our early childhood portfolio here at the Levy. I'm relatively new. I've been around for about a year.
So you're doing the next steps, Brian?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And to your point, actually, Dan, when we downloaded all the information from web grants and all the application data, we had 6,800 pages of data that all of our 96 reviewers read throughout that process. So that's something I like to share just to uplift how much work those volunteers actually did for us. It was pretty epic. So anyway, okay, on to funding process next steps. So here we have our timeline where we are in the levy right now. We're in February at the allocation committee meeting. And as you can see, we're kind of in the very thick of the middle of the process where the staff right now, we're working to create our 2 anonymous portfolios that we're going to take to the community council. So we can go to the next slide and I'll describe the next steps for the funding process. So we're currently working on creating the 2 portfolios for funding recommendations for the community council to consider at their meeting that's coming up in March. Those portfolios are going to be anonymous. At no point will the community council see the names of the organizations or how much. It's going to be all high-level descriptive data. And then, so to create those recommendations, the pieces that we're going to consider as staff, they include the application score that our reviewers worked so hard to get to us. Also, the community council's priorities, which are what you just heard about. And then, to your point, Felicia, from earlier, past performance of current grantees programs. We're also going to analyze the cost of the proposed program in the context of the scale of the program, the size of the program, how much they're asking for, kind of those characteristics, as well as the overall applicant's financial health, looking through their financial documentation. So to help the committee members here sort of understand how the council priorities could result in like 2 different portfolios, we're still crafting that and we're still working on that. But for today, we've created sort of a simplified hypothetical example that to show what it might look like just focusing on 2 of those priorities that we discussed from community council. And that's applications from organizations that don't have current PCL grants and applications from small organizations. So on the next slide here, we sort of have a 2 portfolio, I forget what to call it, like a sort of 2 portfolios, 1 and 2. And in this example, Both portfolios would include 40 applications that scored median or higher and from organizations without current PCL grants. Over half of the funding recommended for applications from grantee organizations for their same PCL programs due to the strong performance of that grantee, and 45 applications from large organizations. And then the differences between the portfolio, which are the second half. In portfolio one, for example, it has more grants as a total. There's 102 grants recommended. There's a different number of grants from the medium-sized organizations, 17 versus 10. And then there's more grants for the high-scoring applications serving a general population in portfolio one than in portfolio two. And the first portfolio might include 40 applications totaling 23 million for small organizations, whereas the second portfolio might have 35 applications totaling 21 million. So fewer applications, a little less money. So these are hypothetical examples, so we don't need to dig into the data necessarily, because I know it could feel a little confusing, but this is more to give you an example of how we're going to approach showing the council these characteristics, so they're not seeing applicant information, but we're instead looking at it from a descriptive, kind of high-level place. Make sense? All right. So staff will present those two portfolios to the community council. That's going to happen on March 3rd, using those descriptive high-level summary data and graphics. And then the community council is going to discuss the two options, and they're going to vote to recommend one to y'all, to the allocation committee, for funding. And throughout the process, again, I'll just say the community council won't receive any identifying information about the applicants. So applicants and the allocation committee, then they'll get their March 7th, they'll get their funding recommendations for the portfolio, and council selects that, they'll get the information that the council has selected for the portfolio. That includes all applications submitted in a program area. So the recommendation list is going to include all of the application scores, the amount of funding recommended, and the rationale for each recommendation. Then the applicants they'll also receive their reviewer score sheets for their individual application that will have their scores and all of their reviewer comments. Applications will then have the opportunity to provide testimony. That'll be due on April 4th. And testimony can be written, audio, or video, and they'll in support of their application. And then the testimony will be provided to y'all, the allocation committee, for the review before the funding decision meetings happen. And then the allocation committee, they'll make funding decisions. Y'all will make funding decisions. I keep saying they, y'all, it's y'all. Can you tell them it's from Texas? Sorry. Y'all will make the funding decisions on the April 23rd meeting, and then your funding decisions will be submitted to the city council for their approval in May. So that's kind of the overall high picture timeline. Questions?
I have a request, actually.
Go for it.
The testimony, is there going to be like a limit? Because it's really important, because some people could send us a ton of information. So, I mean, one year we got videos, which were perfect, but you just mentioned 3 different forms of communication, which could really be an onslaught for us as the allocation committee. I would just recommend some sort of boundaries around testimony.
Absolutely. And I'm pretty confident that we do that. Correct, Lisa? Yeah.
And Lisa knows.
Yeah, we're just about to, we haven't released it to applicants, so we didn't go through the whole thing. But yes, you can choose one form of testimony and only one, and then there are limitations on either time or space that you can use to submit that. And then you all receive links so you can view all that testimony as you like, and on your own time, whenever it's convenient for you.
Any other questions for Brian?
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brian.
You bet.
And next up, we have Meg, you're back. And this is about performance report from 23-24.
Correct.
Okay.
All right, this presentation that I am proud to give you all, because it reflects the good work of the grantees in our community, is 18 slides. So I'm letting you know that now, so you can kind of relax, take a deep breath. But it is also dense. I'm going to do my best to walk you through it as easily as possible, but please pause anytime you have a question. I'm happy to answer them as we go. Just want to, okay. All right. Then, so this is, as Commissioner Ryan said, this is looking at the fiscal year July 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024. And these are levy-wide performance highlights. We have a more technical appendix that is available on our website and that was sent to you all in advance of this meeting. And then also these slides will look at some performance trends between fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 24, so 3 years that really shaped the recovery out of the pandemic. In the past, we have included photos and quotes from grantees in this report, but because we're in a current funding round, we chose not to do that at this time. I just want to say thanks again to all of our grantee partners who do not only the work of the services, but take the time to report on that work to us so that we can put this report together and tell the story to you all and to the public about the work that they're doing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just a reminder, this report is in service of the 3 Levy goals, which are to prepare children for school, to support children's success inside and outside of school, and to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities in children's well-being and school success. These goals are part of the act that is included with the city ordinance that referred the levy to voters for reauthorization. And this presentation is divided up into the following sections to help us understand our progress toward these goals. The first is access to service, so understanding the number of children served and their demographics. The next part is understanding the types of services provided and whether or not service providers were able to reach their goals as intended with the amount of service they wanted to provide. The next part looks at participation or attendance, whether or not children or families took providers up on the opportunities that they were offering. And then finally, we look at outcomes that occurred as a result of families' access to services and participation. And then there is a couple of other last parts of this presentation, one of which is around the demographics of the staff and board of organizations that receive Levy grants. And we report that data in response to community engagement results from our 2019-20 funding process, asking to understand more who are the folks that do the work in this community for the children and families served. So first we'll look at service access. This slide, like I said, is going to look at 3 years as well as our most recent year. So on this slide, we're looking at data from 73 different grants across 5 program areas, which are early childhood, child abuse prevention intervention, foster care, after school, and mentoring. This includes our small grants and our community child care initiative. And we look at it this way because these are relationship-based services. I'm going to cover our hunger relief services separately from the next several slides. So the programs all set goals for the number of participants they plan to serve, and participants can be children or parents or caregivers, depending on the program model. In fiscal year 24, programs reached their goals for the number of participants they wanted to serve. And what this slide is telling us is that we are back to reaching our pre-pandemic rate. So in pre-pandemic, programs reached 100% of the goals for the number of people that they wanted to serve, and we are back to that from the past few years. So that is exciting to see. I do want to point out, though, however, that in our after-school and foster care program areas and mentoring, they are slightly under their goals in fiscal year 24. And in the past 3 years, all 3 of those program areas have not achieved their goals for numbers of children and participants to serve. So as we think about, I think, Felicia, you asked the question earlier about sort of participation in light of demand that we're seeing in applications. Sort of there are things we will continue to balance as we think about the resources we have to invest. Thank you for the slides, Yuxing. So on this next slide, we're looking specifically at the children that were served. So the slide I just talked about participants, which included parents and children. This slide is just children, so the children who belong to those parents that were the key participant and all other children that were enrolled in levy-funded services. There were 9,638 children served in fiscal year 24, and we collect data on the demographics of children served from our grantee organizations. And what we know from those data is that 90% of children served were from families earning low incomes at 185% of the federal poverty level or less. And I just want to point out for folks who don't know, in 2024, that level is $57,720 for a family of 4. 185% of the federal poverty level is also what qualifies you for the free and reduced price lunch program in our public schools. 185% of the federal poverty level is also about half of the median income of Portland for a family of 4. So just again for scale. 77% of children served identify as Black, Indigenous, or children of color. 44% live in East Portland or attend school in East Portland. 37% speak a primary language at home other than English, and from grantees, over 50 different languages are reported as spoken as primary languages in homes. And then finally, we have the range of data on the bottom kind of comes from 2 different sources. So grantees report to us by collecting data from children and families at intake and enrollment. From those data, 6% of children served have a disability. However, we have a partnership with Multnomah Education Service District to understand better some of these types of data about the children who are participating in after-school and mentoring programs funded by the Levy. Through that partnership, we know that 22% of children served in those 2 program areas qualify for special education or 504 plan.
Can I ask a quick question about, and maybe this is a separate follow-up, but how disability is defined when they're asked and what that encompasses?
That's a big question. We really leave it to the providers to determine that. I mean, the Individuals with Disabilities in Education Act is one way that they might think about it. The ADA could be another way that they think about it. Some providers are collecting that information because they're asking families. Some families aren't answering that question at intake necessarily if they don't have to. They're not required to, but they may opt not to even if it's asked. And some providers may not be asking it. So that's one of the reasons we opted to work with the Multnomah Educational Service District, just to understand a little bit better without having to make families answer that question, sort of how can we understand those data a little differently and better.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Moyer, go ahead.
Yeah, for our early childhood work, where this may not yet be formally identified, how are we able to assess the population and if we wish to target that population in that early childhood, what are people putting in their grant applications in order to say, yes, we're targeting this population?
Got it. So this is grant applications. I want to answer that question, but I want to separate that from talking about what these data are, which is folks who already have our money and performed services and what they're doing. So I want to answer that question first, and then I'll come back to grant applications. In early childhood, most of the services that we fund are using the Ages and Stages questionnaire to do developmental screening with children on a regular basis. So most of those programs are not only using that screening, but they are also a key point at helping those children connect to the next level of early intervention services. Typically, we also in the past have funded Head Start and Early Head Start. They're federally required to have 10% of their slots go to children who have disabilities. In early childhood, I would say the rate of children who have disabilities is higher compared to other program areas because those developmental screenings are identifying things, and those programs are working with those children and families to make sure kids are connected and getting early intervention services. Did I answer the sort of what's happening on the ground? And then there's what are people doing in their applications? Many of the services that we currently fund want us to continue funding them. So the things that are happening now would be continuing to be funded. There were some services that are from organizations that are new to me, and I'm still trying to understand some of the answers to those questions. Some of those providers aren't necessarily seeking to, or didn't name that they were seeking to do developmental screening. It may be that we didn't ask the question in a way that made them want to talk about that. It may be that they're not doing it. So I have to dig under that just a little bit more. So does that help? Great, okay. All right, next slide. So this slide is a map that shows the concentration of children served by the levy based on zip code of where they live or attend school. And the darker colors show the greater concentration, and the lighter colors show a lesser concentration. So what you see here is that in fiscal year 24, for the zip codes in North and East Portland, we had the highest concentration of children served, and for zip codes that are closer to downtown, fewer and lower concentration of children served. These results didn't surprise us because we are trying to focus our services on where children and families who are earning low income or Black, Indigenous, and children of color reside or attend school, and it tends to be in those geographies. This map does not show you that the levy served 292 children who were considered homeless last year, and that there are 1,300 children for whom no zip code data were provided by grantees. Okay, so that was sort of who came into services. Now we're going to look at what happened while they were in the services. So this graph looks at how well grantees achieved their goals of providing the amount of service they had projected to do. So for example, all of our grant agreements have activity goals like offering a certain number of group mentoring sessions or a certain number of after-school classes that are a certain length per session. So we look at those as goals and we count up whether or not they met them. In fiscal year 24, grantees met 80% of their service activity goals. And what you can see in this pandemic recovery period is that as people returned to in-person services, they were more able to meet the types of goals that they had projected and planned. We didn't aggregate data like this before the pandemic. So I don't have a pre-pandemic comparison, and that's because before the pandemic, folks typically met their activity goals. It was the outlier that they weren't able to deliver the amount or types of services that they had planned. But once the pandemic hit, things really shifted as people pivoted virtually and then had to try to re-pivot to come back in being in person. So that's why we've been looking at it this way over the past few years. Our programs in child abuse prevention, intervention, and foster care have had more challenges. They reached 70% of their goals, and this is mainly due to staff turnover and vacancies that limited the program's ability to implement services. And those two program areas had lower rates of achieving their activity goals over the past 3 years compared to the other program areas. And again, staffing has been a consistent challenge. All of our grant agreements also include what we call participation goals for children and families. This is attendance. So it's one thing for a grant program to decide how much service it's going to offer. It's another thing to understand how well do children and families show up and participate in the services that are offered. So our grantees set goals for that. In fiscal year 24, children and caregivers met 68% of those attendance goals that were set. What you can see here is that we are still not back to our pre-pandemic rate. Before the pandemic, participants met about 80% of those participation and attendance goals and programs. So over the last 3 years, we are improving. Things are improving, but we are still having a hard time. Mentoring and after-school programs had lower rates of participation. They were closer to 52% and 67% respectively. And in other program areas, it ranged from 74% to 81%. Mentoring and after-school programs have had the lowest participation rates compared to other PCL program areas for the past 3 years. Again, staffing vacancies impact missed participation goals. With after-school and mentoring, we also had other factors like sites that were closed during the district school closures from the strike last year, and then also the winter storm. And of course, illnesses continue to impact whether or not children and families show up for services. In mentoring in particular, our program focuses on middle school and high school aged youth. And of course, kids in that age group have competing demands for their time. They can choose whether or not to attend these programs. Our program areas like early childhood or child abuse prevention, intervention, where there are younger children and families are bringing them to services tend to have higher participation rates. All right. Next, we'll look at outcome goals, so we understand who came to the services, whether or not activities occurred, whether or not people participated in them. So now we'll see what happened as a result of that. We have, of course, in our grant agreements, outcome goals for all of the programs. An outcome goal typically looks something like a certain percentage of youth, so 90% of youth will demonstrate positive school engagement, or 85% of parents will demonstrate or increase positive parenting practices. Most of our programs were able to collect and track and report data on their outcome goals this year compared to previous years where there was a lot more disruption, so we've had better rates of data collection. And across all of our all of our grantees, there are 219 goals that were tracked, and they met almost 80% of those goals. And we are back to pre-pandemic rates of meeting outcomes as well. So for children and families who are consistently attending services, they are seeing the outcomes that are planned for those services, which is great. The following slides are going to get into some of the specific outcomes in each of our program areas. And these are only tracked for kids and families who met their participation goals and for whom the program model is relevant for this outcome. So I'll walk you through that on the next slide. So this slide looks at early childhood and child abuse prevention intervention. So I'll just take the top line there. There were 15 programs that the Levy funded in early childhood last year. 11 of them tracked this particular outcome because it was relevant to the services that they provide. For those 11 programs, there were 392 children who were tracked for this outcome, and 336 of them met the outcome. So 86% of children met developmental milestones in early childhood last year. So that's how you can interpret each of these outcomes on this slide and the next slide. I'm not going to read each of them because it will take a little bit of time, but I think big picture, what I want to help you understand is that on the outcomes listed here, 75% or more of the clients, whether they were children or parents, met their outcomes. And for foster care, after school, sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Moyer.
Yeah, on some of these where it's like meeting developmental milestones, do we have data of like what a similar population not receiving services would have in order to see the effectiveness of the investment?
This is a great question. We don't personally have comparison group data. This is not even a data from a child database. Like, we don't have client data coming into us that we analyze. We ask grantees to answer certain questions in a report to us. They submit those reports to us. We then aggregate all that data up to bring this to you. So I don't have any way to isolate kids who came into our programs to a similar comparison group.
Yeah.
I can only use kind of like what research exists, sort of out there in the literature to sort of say, like, yes, kids who come to programs regularly and get developmental screenings tend to be more likely to meet their milestones and do better by the time they get to school than kids who don't. But yeah.
Okay, just wondering.
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, for these program areas, foster care, after school, and mentoring, and our small grants, again, I'm not going to read each one of these. I kind of helped you see how you can interpret the data, but big picture, 87% or more of children and youth in our programs in these areas met their outcome goals. I just want to give a minute for people to read through it. So separately from what grantees report to us directly, as I said earlier, we have a partnership with Multnomah Education Service District, the local school districts, and through our work with grantees, we can look at school-related outcome data across the pool of children who participate in Levy-funded after-school and mentoring programs. So again, these are aggregate data. I don't know the specifics for any given child in any of the services that we fund. And these are, again, only children who met participation goals in Levy-funded programs. So what this is showing you, these three columns, the first column is the most recent year that we just completed. And we're looking at metrics around school and academic success. So whether or not kids are attending 90% of school days, whether or not kids had behavior referrals or of suspension and expulsion, credit attainment, and then graduation. And so what we see for three of these, school behavior, credit attainment, and graduation, kids in Levy-funded programs are meeting those goals at a rate that they did before the pandemic. And we've improved from fiscal year or school year 23 to school year 24. School attendance is still a challenge, but I want to put that in context. It's not just a challenge across students who participate in levy-funded programs. It's a challenge across our districts, excuse me. And 61% of students in the greater Portland area attended 90% of school days last year. So actually, in levy-funded programs, we're slightly higher, 63%. We'll call that a success. But the main thing is that, schools still have pretty serious policies around attending school when you're ill. And so I don't think we don't know to what extent attendance here is being affected by illness. We can't tease that out or control for it. Just want to pause for a minute because these are technical data. So.
That was my burning question, was if you could tease out if the mentoring program offered by levy funds helped increase school attendance.
I wish that we could, but we do not have that kind of statistical
Or if
analysis.
it was an outcome that was, that you noticed, a goal that you noticed in the applications last time around, and we'll look at that. I'd like to see that in this next round.
Okay. I'll put the application question aside a little bit and come back to what's happening on the ground now. What I can tell you is that in the past, pre-pandemic, typically kids in levy-funded after-school and mentoring programs had a higher percent of attending 90% of school days compared to the general rate overall. So if you want to draw conclusions about that, you can, but I don't have any statistical strength around that conclusion drawing.
I have a question related to the behavioral referral for suspension or expulsion. To what extent does Portland Public School still do that as a practice? I thought that they had curbed that, and so I'm wondering if that's really an outcome of the program or an outcome of the district policy.
That's a good question. I would not call these outcomes of our programs. These are more descriptive data for you to understand kind of what's happening with students in levy-funded services. These are also not just PPS students. These are David Douglas students. These are Park Rose students, Centennial students, some Reynolds students. So I don't know. I think your question is very fair, Commissioner. There are lots of things influencing what that rate looks like. Absolutely. And if I were to guess, I would say district policies have a lot more to do with it than whether or not a student participated in a levy-funded service. But I think it is important to notice that for the students who are participating in those services, this is what that's what their school behavior data suggest.
Yeah, and to know our ecosystem that we're working within, so we can be realistic about what kind of outcomes we should expect. All right, I'm going to pivot to a completely different topic. All right, hunger relief services. So we talk about these differently, of course, because they are a lot different than relationship-based services. These are emergency food related response services, and so they may not have an ongoing relationship with a child and family. And the next few slides are going to look at these services. So the levy has 12 hunger relief grants, and they collectively reached over 12,000 individual children. These programs were a little bit under their goals in fiscal year 24, well, more than a little bit, by 15%. Goals were missed because for many school pantries during November, when those schools were closed, those pantries didn't operate. In addition, when schools were closed due to weather events last year, pantries also didn't operate. So they served fewer children than they anticipated. They also gave away fewer pounds of food than projected due to those closures. But overall, for these 12,000 children served in levy-funded hunger relief programs, 65% of them identify as Black, Indigenous, and children of color, and 60% of them live or attend school in East Portland. The programs collectively do a lot of different things. There are emergency school food pantries. There's meal delivery, which is both prepared meals and groceries. There are garden-based food education programs, and there are also
workshops and classes and kits that get provided to folks around nutrition and gardening and social determinants of health as it relates to food. Collectively, the programs distributed over 2.5 million pounds of food. They did this at 63 different community locations that include schools, affordable housing communities, parks, and of course, delivery to some folks' homes. Over 300,000 prepared meals were distributed to 1,800 people. That includes children and their caregivers, and 229 classes and over 1,000 kits were provided. So across all of our program areas, I want to come back to a really important issue. It's going to be something we all are going to have in mind as we think about the next round of grant investments, and that is staffing. As I said earlier, there were missed goals, whether it was due to whether it was the types of services that programs imagined or projected to offer, or whether or not families and children attended as much service as a program projected. Those were very much affected by staffing. That in child abuse prevention, intervention, and foster care, again, the types of activities they planned to offer were affected by whether or not they had staff in place. And mentoring, when staff were vacant and turnover occurred, it means that mentors didn't see the kids that they were planning to see. Over a third of our funded programs reported staffing issues directly affecting their ability to meet some goal, whether it was activity goals or participation goals. We, as a staff, plan to further study wage levels as well across programs to better understand the pay ranges that are available and the extent to which pay correlates with these staff retention issues that we're seeing. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about the organization.
Can you go back to that?
Yes.
So you said 1/3 are still reporting staff issues. Now, is this, I know in 2021, those were high numbers, and they've improved, I assume, over the last 2 years, correct? It's still at 31%
It's a
currently?
third of our grantees, so a third of our funded programs reported some impact from staff vacancy and turnover.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have a question as well.
Totally.
On the activity goals, do you know how much of that is impacted by safety? So like, as Commissioner Ryan mentioned earlier about students feeling safe attending school, and also students or families feeling safe going to a food pantry that's not out of school, for instance, where they've maybe had break-ins or they can't stay open.
Great question. We don't ask grantees to report specifically about safety, and I'm looking at my grant manager colleagues to see if safety came up as something that you read a lot about in reports as to how it impacted. It may be because we didn't ask, but I'm looking at people nodding no. So it wasn't something that necessarily people wrote about in their reports freely, but I don't know if that might look different if we had asked specific questions around it.
I think what we're experiencing, at least two of
Yeah,
us,
oh, okay.
Here they come.
Apologies.
it's still a really concerning and high number, and so I think we collectively probably want to know the why, more of the why on that.
On staff turnover?
Yeah, why the report is still 1/3 are still reporting staff issues and participation challenges. I think the why, now that we're 4 years into this, is becoming more concerning, and it's a big picture issue, obviously. So.
Yeah. You don't have to turn it on.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take this off. I've been sick, but I'm better. I just have a cough. So, I would say in mentoring, I haven't heard concerns about the safety of the mentoring sites, like the places where the organizations are offering the service. I have heard over the past concern, like the youth experiencing community violence, that has impacted the ways they've been able to offer the service, the mental health of the youth, and how they engage with the program. That has come up a lot in mentoring because a lot of the youth who are in mentoring programs are in those programs because their attendance wasn't great in the first place. And so they were at risk at that, and they were at risk of being affected by things like community violence or gain participation and the carceral system in a variety of ways. So I've heard safety come up in terms of the youth's experience in the community a lot. And then the other thing that I saw is like there are a couple of programs that just really had a hard time hiring mentors, and particularly people are looking to match mentors by gender and kind of cultural backgrounds and lived experience. And there was a lot of a struggle finding like male mentors in particular for the youth who identify as boys or males. So those were some things that I think really impacted staffing in the mentoring portfolio that are related to that.
Just to speak to your question about safety, in the after-school portfolio, we did hear some families having concerns around for programs where youth had to sort of maybe walk to a site or travel at some point, and if transportation wasn't really locked in and organized, some families were pulling back from that just because they didn't feel safe to have their kid, walk at night if it was dark out, that kind of thing. So, and I think there was some relationship to community safety in that as well, in those conversations around transportation or lack of transportation and how kids can get to a site to experience a program.
And I'll add for child abuse prevention, intervention, and foster care program. I didn't necessarily hear conversations about safety. It had everything to do with filling vacancies, the time to fill those vacancies, and really not having a physical body to do the work. So that was the theme there.
And there were some organizations which were beating the odds and they weren't suffering these numbers.
Correct.
Yeah. And so this is more of a practice question. So do we have learning communities where those that are beating the odds and having greater success, are they sharing those practices? Is that helpful to their peer organizations? I'm thinking about the convening of that, and I'm not trying to do mission creep. I'm just wondering
I hear
where
you.
those conversations take place now.
We do convene grantees, and I think the grant managers who do that work, if you want to weigh in, I don't know to what extent your convenings have had people sharing about staffing.
I I meet with my grantees in large several times throughout the year, and they definitely have had opportunities and initiated opportunities to have these conversations amongst themselves when we get together.
So that's a yes. Okay.
I would say
You turned it off.
the mentoring convenings have not focused as much around staffing in particular. Everyone was looking for staffing. And so in a way that's challenging because they're all like competing to find mentors. And it's also challenging. Every organization has its own wage scales and programs across, and that's all very complicated. It's not like something that you can really compare between organizations and do lessons learned around that. The program staff don't have control over that. That would have to be at a different level.
And we haven't had any after-school convenings. I've only been here for a year, and we've been primarily doing the funding process. So we haven't focused on convening for after-school in my time around staffing. But the larger groups that work on out-of-school time programs, the national organizations that provide convention-y type things and programs have all been really focused on staffing. So there have been a lot of shared learnings. I understand that they've talked about from a greater perspective that way, but as far as our grantees specifically, we haven't done that yet.
Thanks. I'll just say it's hard not to chew on the bigger picture, the whole COVID isolation, the mental health crisis, and trying to get people back in person is difficult. And for some reason, our market suffered more than some parts of the country on this. It seems, my hunch is that this is somewhat connected. Felicia, you probably have some great insight on this in your role. Yeah.
Biggest I've seen barriers are exactly what Erica said, gender and actually pay. A lot of these organizations with the cost of just living in Portland, you can't afford to be a mentor. The pay is so low.
Yeah, That's one of the reasons we want to look at our wage ranges and understand.
Yeah. I mean, when Erica rightly so mentioned the complications comparing each one, and yet we should try to figure that out because the hunch would be that the ones paying better might be retaining staff at a higher level.
Yep.
So, yeah. And then it gets back to the smaller, bigger, and, are we birthing more organizations that won't have the adequate funds to, it's just something to ponder at this level. And I'm sure you're thinking about it deeply all the time.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I will add one pre-pandemic insight that we had. We did some surveying of grantees in child abuse prevention, intervention, foster care, and early childhood in 2016, 2017, and asked about factors that influence their staffing retention. And this was from the perspective of the direct service provider, so not management or hiring folks. But those folks had more to say about the nature of their work and their satisfaction with their work than they did about wage. Like when they had to kind of rank things that influenced whether or not they stay in their job and felt supported. Wage was not as high as overall stress and satisfaction with the job. I'm not trying to say that we shouldn't pay people better. I just want to make that clear. But what I am trying to say is that I think pay is one part of it, and these jobs are really difficult, and I don't think they're getting any easier, and pay isn't keeping pace. So it is a difficult nut to crack. I
No,
think.
thank you for putting that into the record.
Yeah.
Yeah, culture usually has a bigger impact. Yeah, thanks.
But good segue. So the demographics of our grantee organizations. Let's see here. Based on community feedback and engagement results from our last funding process, so 2019-20, we heard loud and clear that it mattered to our community who is providing services to children and families. They wanted to understand better the cultural identity and backgrounds of staff who provide services directly and lead and manage the organizations that receive Levy grants. So we've been asking for that information from our grantee organizations for the past several years. For the organizations that reported it, of the 50 organizations that we fund, 67% of them serve altogether majority Black, Indigenous, and people of color clients. So this is all the clients, not just people served by the levy, so that you can understand sort of who these organizations are focused on. 64% of the organizations have majority Black, Indigenous, and people of color staff. 55% have majority Black, Indigenous, and people of color management staff, and half of them had majority Black, Indigenous, and people of color boards of directors. So in general, how the Levy grants have gone to organizations over the past several years have reflected what community engagement priorities were at that time. I'm going to wrap us up on a few last slides that look at our community childcare initiative. This is a special project, a special initiative, we call it. It's not part of our large grants. It's not part of our small grants. It's its own special initiative. It addresses two of the Levy's program areas, early childhood and after school. It provides childcare subsidies to working families earning a low income who have children ages 6 weeks to 12 years old so that they can access high quality childcare in our community. It complements the state's employment-related daycare subsidy program in 4 different ways. It helps families choose high quality childcare. It serves children and families who are on the wait list for the state's ERDC program. It covers the co-pays for the families who receive state ERDC, and it covers the gap between what a child care provider's fees are and what the state subsidy will reimburse the provider with. Last year, it served 210 children. It exceeded its goal of serving 200 children. And the majority of those children identify as Black, Indigenous, and children of color. And there were 72 child care providers in our community participating in the program. 44 of them were child care centers, and 28 of them are family child care sites. The Community Child Care Initiative serves families who earn an income up to 250% of the federal poverty level. So it's a slightly higher income bracket than you heard about some of our other programs. However, it prioritizes its support to families who are earning 200% or less of the federal poverty level. Just to give you a little sense of how it's helping for families who participated in the program last year, the monthly median income of those families was $3,700 a month. The monthly median cost of their child care before the subsidy was $1,950. The state's ERDC subsidy at a monthly median last year for families in the program was $1,200, and CCI was picking up the remaining for a monthly median subsidy per family of nearly $800. Last spring, I worked with the folks who implement that program at Child Care Resource and Referral, Multnomah County, to survey families and providers who've been participating in that program for the last 3 years. We used survey instruments developed in 2006 when CCI was first developed. And those survey instruments were developed by Dr. Shannon Lipscomb at OSU. And those surveys focused on parents' finances and quality of care that they obtain for their children while participating in the program, the providers' finances and aspects of quality of care and business stability that they, the benefits that they get from participating in the program. And then the surveys included some optional demographic questions to understand who completed them. The survey response rate for families was 44%, and for providers was 43%. Among respondents to the, so we had 85 families who responded to the survey. Among the survey respondents, 88% said they had the financial help from CCI made them more likely to choose higher quality childcare than if they had not had the assistance, and that 99% of them were satisfied with their experience. For childcare providers, 91% said that they CCI increased their retention of children in their care, and over half of them said they used the financial subsidy payments that they received toward hiring additional staff or giving higher wages to their staff. And I want to end this presentation, great work everyone, with 2 quotes that I think really speak to the value of a program like this. One is from a parent and caregiver who participated in CCI, and the other one is from a child care provider. But I would love to have volunteers from our allocation committee read the quotes if anybody's willing to read one and somebody else read the other. Thanks, Charity.
I have always had anxiety when it came to assistance and how much it would cover, but knowing that no matter what my outcome with my ERDC was, I still had CCI to fall back on for the last 2 years for both my kiddos' tuition. It has given me peace of mind that I'll forever be grateful for, from parent and caregiver CCI participant.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan.
Is either me or Felicia. It's been wonderful to not have to worry about losing income when I enroll ERDC clients and providing that additional stability not only for families, but also for my business.
Thank you. That concludes my slides and presentation. I'm happy to answer any other questions.
Meg with Preschool for All, will we still be doing the CCI program, or how is it? It's going to be in complement? How are we going to do this?
Such a great question. Yes, I would like us to still be doing CCI. When we come back to you in April with the recommendations for the large grants, we'll have a recommendation at that time for CCI. Keep in mind that right now CCI serves infants through age 12. They are clear that that is the focus of where they're trying to be, sort of infants and toddlers and children who need before and after care. Preschool for All is not in every child care provider's facility in Multnomah County. So there will still be a need for some families who have preschool age children and who want to have their child care subsidized to have access to CCI. But I suspect it will be a smaller number than it is today. In our early childhood competitive grants, we will not be funding Head Start, preschool classrooms anymore on account of the availability of preschool for all. Yes, Commissioner.
Yeah, just to let you know where preschool for all is at. We're expanding enrollment, but are not projected to reach full enrollment until 2030. We are now at a goal of 4,000 families. That is out of an estimated total population of families served of, and I could get this wrong, 13,000
Sounds right to me.
families. So we're definitely making progress. It's exciting, but there's still quite a lot of families who have preschool age children who are not yet served.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thanks so much, Meg.
Yeah, thank you all.
And Lisa, you're back up about the City of Portland governmental transition. Why do I think we already covered that in the first item?
We did mostly. This will be the shortest item ever. I just wanted, because I came to this group in December, and of course now we have some new people, letting you all know that PCL had been joined into or assigned to the Vibrant Community Service Area at the City of Portland. The City of Portland has divided up all of its bureaus into service areas. So we were assigned to the Vibrant Communities Service Area with Portland Parks and Recreation and the city's Office of Arts and Culture. In the meantime, between our last meeting and now, staff has learned that the new mayor and the council may further revise the city's service areas and assign PCL elsewhere. We don't know the budgetary or other impacts of that, since we don't know whether that will take place, and if so, where we will go. So we will just continue to bring updates to this committee and let you all know the impact as soon as we do, as the city proceeds through its budget process.
Now I know why you wanted to bring that up. Thank you. And
I want to keep you all updated.
no, yeah, we're in an I don't know place on that. But it was transparent of you to mention that. And I know as much as you do. So. Is there any other business for the good of the order? It was really wonderful to have everyone here in person. That hasn't happened in a long time. And it was great to have new voices at the table. Thank you, Commissioner and Charity. This is only your second meeting, though it feels like it's been longer. And thanks for going to the community council meeting. That was great insight. And Felicia, you're like the OG up here, so appreciate it. And the Dans over here are just soaking up all the wisdom from the superior gender on the other side. I do think we're at the end, right? You want me to stop, I'm sure. Our next meeting is on Wednesday, the 23rd of April. Stay tuned for the date on the Levy website. Agendas are always posted on the Levy email list and shared on the Facebook page and posted on web. We do welcome participation. We know we have so much that goes on in between these meetings. Looking at the people from the Community Council, thank you for the work that you're doing. And we look forward to what we will hear about in April, but we also know we'll have homework in between. So this meeting is now adjourned. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. And thank you, staff. And there's no gavel, so there it goes.